As debates over big tech and social media platforms continue, there is now an alternative called Gettr. The social media platform Gettr officially launched on July 4th with the mission of fighting cancel culture, promoting common sense, defending free speech, challenging social media monopolies, and creating a true marketplace of ideas. And today I am so pleased to be joined by the CEO of Gettr, Jason Miller. Thank you so much for being here, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, tell us a little bit of the history behind Gettr and how it came to launch on July 4th.
Yeah, so really what we're seeing here is kind of the convergence of this cancel culture movement that's going on in the US and also the suppression of free speech that we saw so much last year on the campaign trail. I mean, I think really kind of a seminal moment was the suppression of the Hunter Biden story. The fact that Twitter and Facebook and other news outlets and big tech really coordinated or colluded, to use the Democrats' terms against them, to keep that story quiet. You know, post election polling shows that 1 out of every 6 Biden voter would have reconsidered their vote or thought differently if they knew about the Hunter story and really that broader Biden family corruption. So that was a big deal on the campaign trail. Obviously, as President Trump's former senior advisor for both of his 2 presidential runs, what I saw happen to him following January 6th, the way that his First Amendment rights were taken away, the way that he was deplatformed. I mean, the fact that I know he said this in his press conference, but if they'll do it to a president of the United States, they'll do it to you, and they won't even blink. And so it started looking was working kind of both within and outside of President Trump's orbit to figure out how we can get another platform going. I think there have been some alternatives they've put out there, but too often folks who are kind of the anti-establishment or outsiders are always told you can have your own platforms, but they're going to look junior varsity. They're going to look inferior. So we wanted to make sure we had superior technology, but then make sure that we had free speech and some good, robust debate. And so came together and met up with some folks who are developing a platform, and we got it launched in short order. So we already have 1 million users, fastest social media platform ever to reach 1 million users, and we're including Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Carson, Peter Navarro, Dinesh D'Souza, a lot of good conservatives.
And the name Gettr, Gettr, where does that come from?
So initially, we're thinking of how we build community. How do we get together? And so we're kicking around, coming up with all these different names. And get together became Gettr. Just ended up being truncated. It's kind of catchy, and everybody asks the question. So I'm like, hey, if they're asking the question, it must be catchy, or it's like they want to know a little bit more about it. It gets folks inquiring. So I was like, this is genius. So it's going to be Gettr. And so I love it when we get asked that question because it means folks are interested.
No, I do love that. Very creative. Now, as far as functionality, does Gettr operate very much so like Twitter?
So certain functions, I mean, you think about the typical social media platforms. I'd say most folks probably describe it as being a more of a head-to-head competitor with Twitter. But when you look at, and just to make sure folks haven't checked it out, so Gettr, Gettr, it's on the App Store, it's on the Google Play Store. Actually, it was number 1, even ahead of TikTok on the Google Play Store day before yesterday. I think it's number 2 behind TikTok right now, which I had to show my 12-year-old, by the way, and say, see, Getter's even a bigger deal than TikTok. And she was like, get lost, boomer. I'm literally shaking. But so we have longer posts, 777 characters. You don't have to worry about getting that 280. Longer videos, we're at 3 minutes. And for some content creators, so I'm thinking of maybe like the Daily Signal, we can give up to 10-minute videos. So then that way you don't have to go and splice everything up into such short blocks. You can also import all of your tweets into Gettr, so your timeline is there. That's key for a couple reasons. One, that's your creativity. That's your hard work and intellectual property. So we can move that so it stays with you. But also think, if you were to be deplatformed or canceled from, say, Twitter in the future, you wouldn't have a backup of any sort of all of that. So that also does that. But we have some really cool things in development. Not only a bunch of additional languages that are coming on, we'll soon have direct messages, we'll have notifications, they'll be coming very shortly. We're also going to have a thing called online appreciation and online tipping. So what that means is, again, this is so big for content creators, and I usually don't go quite as granular on this, but because this is a pretty smart audience and you got a lot of content creators who listen to Heritage and Daily Signal, So that means people who, whether they create videos or they create memes or they write articles, think of the way that things have become decentralized with the Substacks of the world or the Patreons or things like that. So this means, let's say that Daily Signal has a super exclusive video that you guys put up there online. It's 10 minutes, and someone sees it, like, you know what? This is really cool stuff. I'm glad to see the work these guys are doing. They can go and hit a coin or a dollar sign. We're figuring out the exact icon in the corner, and you can even preset it to where, say, I want to give them $1 or $5 or $10 and go and contribute toward that. It might seem small, but as you see the move of where people are going to say Rumble and things like that to find ways to monetize their online content, we think this is a way that we can draw content creators in. Also, and just go a step further, because I know that there are a number of elected officials who follow you guys as well. I'm making it super easy so you can do the same type thing for a candidate and give right to them, because there's nothing more than a politician hates more than to go and beg for money, or, please support me and here's a link to some WinRed thing, and then people are like, wait, what is this? But same thing, do some kind of dollar sign or something in the corner to where people can click on it and give money to their favorite politician. So that way, if someone has a really insightful post, so I'm thinking of the Ted Cruz's of the world, who have good social media platforms and a lot of hot takes and things that always make you like, yeah, Ted, go get him. Then you could just click in that button and go and contribute to his campaign without them having to go and constantly send out some link.
And you all are really branding yourself, of course, as a free speech platform. So, what are those guarantees that you're making to your users that their free speech will be protected and not censored if they use Gettr?
Yeah, great question. And I will tell you that content moderation and platform moderation is not something that traditionally in my life I've spent a lot of time on, other than being upset when a lot of my friends have gotten booted off. But something I've rapidly become an expert in over the past few months. So I spent a lot of time on this. And we do have a robust moderation policy, and I'll tell you why. Free speech goes right up to the point when you start to infringe on somebody else's rights. And so, for example, the same way that if you walked into a convenience store, for example, and you said you threatened somebody with physical harm, there would be consequences to that. And so, the same thing, you can't go and do that online. You can't threaten people physically. You can't use racial epithets and slurs. You can't go and post graphic pictures of pornography. These are some basic things that we don't want people doing, where our commitment to the users of Gettr is you will never be censored or deplatformed for your political speech. And I think that's very important. So when we think about why people are getting kicked off of Facebook or Twitter or other things, it's simply because their political opinion isn't agreed to by the overlords in Silicon Valley. So people who maybe raise issues with election integrity, or people who say, here's a shocker, hydroxychloroquine works. And then they find themselves kicked off, or, fire Fauci. Next thing you know, they've been, I mean, Lord, that probably not that one, because I say fire Fauci almost every day. And no one's ever tried to kick me off on that. But you know what I'm saying, just maybe questioning some of the, say, mask protocols. And so those are political opinions. And so, again, our guarantee, you're never going to be censored or deplatformed or cancel cultured because of your political beliefs. But yes, we do have both an AI system that works with a human monitoring system. Certain things then get elevated to an executive team, and then some posts even get raised to my attention, and which has already happened a number of times. And so we do have some policies in place, and we have to, because we want this to be an inviting platform, and we want people to obviously download an account and create one. We want people to come back. We want them to have fun. I mean, I'll give you one super quick example. So Dinesh D'Souza, who that we've all known for years, I followed him on Twitter. I would never see his posts. And I was like, now he's on Gettr, and I see everything. He populates my timeline. This guy is pretty prolific on the social media front. Clearly, he was shadow banned. I would never see his content or anything he did on Twitter. Now I see him all the time on Gettr, and I like what he has to say. So he's someone I want to follow. When I open up Gettr, I'm like, oh, I wonder if Dinesh said anything cool. There's some other people like that I look forward to. And so if we can make Gettr fun, we get people coming back. That's the whole goal.
That's great. Well, of course, this has been a major issue and on the minds of many, many Americans for a long time, but obviously increased after January 6th. I recently spoke on this show with Mark Meckler, the former CEO of Parler, and, we talked about the details of what happened to Parler, and he specifically raised that so much of the core of the challenges that they face came when Amazon Web Services stopped hosting them. So for Gettr, how are you all, ensuring that something like what happened to Parler won't happen to you? And what are the web services that you all are using to host your platform in order to prevent, the whole platform being brought down by Amazon?
Yeah, great question. Actually, the I'm a little bit less concerned on the Amazon front. We are starting with AWS, but we have redundancies in place on that, and so I'm not as concerned on that one. The one that look when you one thing a lot of folks might not understand is say the difference between Google Play and the Android open system, open environment applications or operating system, excuse me, versus iOS with Apple. So if you have an Android phone, you can literally go to a website and download the app. You don't have to go to an Apple store or, excuse me, a Google store. You can. And again, like I said, with Google Play, we've either been number one or number two for this entire week, which is super exciting. Excuse me. But with Apple, it's a closed system, so they can decide what apps are on or off their entire system. And then once if they were going to remove an app, then it's not going to work with your phone. So take a look at what happened with Fortnite, for example. And Fortnite and Apple are in a pretty heated battle as we speak, and so I'm not sure the exact status on that, but I know my 12-year-old plays Fortnite, and so I kind of learned through her on this stuff. So on the web hosting services, that's not something. I mean, again, we think that our proactive, robust moderation strategy will make sure that we're okay. But look, someone at Apple could wake up on any day and say, we don't want to have you, and that would be an issue. And there's really no workaround other than the fact that tell folks to get the Samsung Galaxy or the Google Android or something like that. One interesting note on this. So while Apple is the big, massive market mover, obviously, as far as iPhones, we just got a whole bunch of market research back, and for Trump voters, and again, that's where a lot of this initial free speech passion is on the right of center. We want everybody, but a lot of the passion's right of center. 57% of Trump voters are Android users. And so think about the disparity on that. So Democrats go much more heavier to Apple. Trump voters go much more heavier to the Samsung Galaxy. I mean, I think of both of my parents have Galaxies. My mother-in-law has a Galaxy. Father-in-law has an Apple iPhone. But you think about that. And so right now we're at a third are web downloads, a third are from the Google Play Store, and a third are from the Apple Store. And so Apple's more of an issue than AWS.
Mm. Jason, I want to ask you, Politico recently wrote a story about Gettr's connection to a Chinese billionaire. Would you like to set the record straight for our listeners about Gettr's reported connection to individuals in China?
Yeah, absolutely. So Miles Guo is a gentleman who is in the U.S. on asylum. He's someone who's been persecuted and prosecuted by the CCP. There's probably no bigger anti-CCP person that I've ever met in my entire life than Miles Guo. But he is not a financial investor in the operation, and he does not have any direct day-to-day role with it. Obviously, he's a friend of it. Now, his family's foundation that is UK based is one of the initial investors. We have kind of a consortium of international investors who contributed. But again, to the point that there's literally nobody who wants to go and make sure that we're sharing democratic thought, that we're finding ways to reach people in China to allow them to talk about democratic messages. And I think in particular, I've had hours and hours of conversations with Mr. Guo about this, but how do we go and continue to reach out and talk with the freedom-loving people of Hong Kong, for example. And that's something that I've only in the last few years, I've had the opportunity to go to Hong Kong. I think I've been 3 times in the last 3 years. One of my favorite cities on the planet. And some of the young people that I met, the company I used to work for, were some of these leaders in this movement, this freedom-fighting movement. And these I say kids only because I'm old now, but they're young, mid-20s, and they're the ones who are trying to figure out ways to go and organize protests and stand up for their rights. And that really struck me because these are, as quiet as church mice that would be in the office, and here they are, these freedom fighters, undercover. And I want to make sure that there are avenues for these folks to stay engaged in it. And so this is very much an anti-CCP, pro-democracy, pro-freedom. And you look right in our description for the app. Our goal, we want to share democracy and freedom around the world. And there's nothing more powerful than an idea. You get an idea in someone's head that they should have an independent voice, that they should have freedom of thought and expression. It's more powerful than any weapon.
Yeah, well, and that's certainly so much so on the hearts and minds of so many Americans right now, that value for free speech and promoting that. You had mentioned earlier in our conversation about Wednesday's press conference. Former President Trump announced Wednesday a class action lawsuit against Facebook, Twitter, Google, and their CEOs over censorship. Your thoughts on this lawsuit?
So I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I just play one on TV. But so as far as the prospects of it, I can't speak to that. But here's what I can say on the political front is that again, President Trump wasn't kicked off of these platforms or wasn't banned because he was repeatedly putting up illegal content or something of that nature. He was kicked off because his political viewpoint was not something that was found acceptable by the social media oligarchs, the social media titans in Silicon Valley. And out of this desire to deplatform and cancel him, trying to make it so he's not a viable political figure in the future, these actions were taken. I think President Trump is exactly right to go and stand up and fight here. I do hope that there's some aspect of change. Again, I don't know what the courts are going to do. I know that the courts have been pushing back more and more on the media and on big tech. I will raise one caution flag with regard to, say, Congress, for example. Keep in mind that the current governing rules, the DMCA, for example, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and some of the different rules that are overseeing all these platforms were created back in the 90s. And this was before, Facebook was even a twinkle in Zuckerberg or the Winklevoss twins' eyes. And the fact that, so these are clearly outdated policies. I do worry about relying on Congress to fix anything. I know that's different than the initial question you asked, but look, most folks in Congress are old white guys for the most part, and I don't think they know the difference between a tweet and a truck. I do worry that if we're relying on Congress, that they could go and screw it up even worse. I'll tell you, just Congress. If you're looking at Congress for a solution, oh boy, that. Sometimes that can be a slippery slope. I think the free market is probably going to be a big chunk of that. It's part of the reason why we started Gettr. People want an alternative.
And is Trump on Gettr? Do you know?
So not yet. So I do have real Donald Trump, his handle reserved for him. It's in a big, beautiful safe in the corner of my office. I spoke to them on Saturday night after his rally in Sarasota, and I was like, "Hey, Mr. President, got your handle all ready for you." And we did sit down with him a couple weeks ago and show him the technology. He was really blown away. It was actually pretty funny because he was looking at I gave him an iPhone loaded up with Gettr, and he kind of held it in his hand. He's like, "Ooh, I haven't done this in a while." He's like, "Can I go and post right now?" So it was a pretty fun conversation. But look, President Trump has offers from several different social media companies as far as what he might do. So the one thing I know from working for him is that don't push him, let him do it on his timing. So right now, my best strategy is show that it's really cool technology and get all of his friends and allies signed up. So he's like, you know what, I want to get out there. This is some cool technology. So that's what I'm hoping.
And for our listeners that are interested in joining Gettr, learning more, where do they go? How do they do that?
Absolutely. So one of a couple things, go to either the Apple Store, the Apple App Store, go to the Google Play Store. You need to go to gettr.com, Gettr.com, and you can download the app. It's super easy to sign on. In fact, if you go to the Gettr.com website, you can go and create your account. Literally, it'll take you about 30 seconds. You don't even have to enter an email address. And boom, you're all signed up. Now, here's the one thing that I will say, though, is if you want to import all of your tweets, then what you have, it's slight. When I say slightly longer, it took me 2 minutes as opposed to 30 seconds. You do need to pick the same screen name that you use for Twitter, and they'll do a couple things to make sure entering the passcode for both, and then boom, it loads up and populates your timeline with all your previous tweets. So Gettr.com, it is fun. I love the commentary, and the other thing that's kind of fun too is that just a lot of creativity, a lot of funny artwork and memes and things that are people putting up. And I think a lot of people just kind of felt disenfranchised over Twitter. Like, this is really kind of run by the far lefties. Now, We do want people from all over the spectrum. Here's what I say: if you believe in free speech, we want you on our platform. If you disagree with cancel culture, we want you on our platform, because certainly not everyone in the country wakes up and says, this is my ideology. When you think about this being a global platform, if President Bolsonaro is on our platform, Brazil was our number 2 country as far as activity in this first week. Folks in Brazil don't wake up and say, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat. But again, if you believe in free speech and you oppose cancel culture, we think you have a home at Gettr.
That's excellent. Jason, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys, Rock. Continued success with the podcast and everything, and look forward to downloading it and listening.
Thanks so much.